I don't even know if I recorded anything here. Oh, shall I redo it? Just in case I didn't, quick intro. We have Eddie's Fender Jaguar, and lovely guitar, except that it's not playing notes correctly, and stuff isn't working. I think I can. I'm doing a recording in between talking to my dad on Skype, who's coming back into the room, so I shall get off in a second. But this has been worked on before. I can see some damage to the fingerboard as well that's been scraped out. Frets have been levelled or redone even, possibly, I don't know. Nut is too low on the low E, definitely. That needs to be shimmed or redone or replaced. So quite a bit of work to make this play the way it should, but it plays beautiful rock and roll tones, and I know that's what Eddie uses it for in his band, so it deserves to be redone so it plays as well as it should. Anyway, I'm going to get off and I will come back in a minute. Here we are. Excuse me, back again. Right, so a quick evaluation of Eddie's Jaguar. It shows a couple of things. First of all, as I said, the neck relief is almost, well, it's non-existent on the bass, on the treble side. There's none, which is why these frets are choking out down here, which is a real shame. On the bass side, it's a fraction, maybe half of a 20th of a millimeter. I mean, practically none. The frets all look like they've been levelled sometime in the past, which we'll come back to and see if they need any more. But what I'm noticing, the nut is not great. It's not only is it, I mean, one of the, it's hard to see, but one of the slots is cut like that. The low E, if that's, you know, whatever, it's at an angle. Can't really show you up close. It's actually cut facing in that way, so the slot goes that way, which I can't really see why that would be, but it's also far too low. So there's a fair bit of, well, nothing too complex to do here. The intonation shows up as completely off here, so it might be worth just looking now while I've got it strings on, whatever. Let's just have a look and see whether the intonation really is that far off, or whether it's right because the strings might be old or whatever. So just looking down here, let's have the, thank you. So let's do, okay, that's on. Pretty much on. You might find this changes when we put new strings on. Okay, so it's doing what it's supposed to. The B, there's something effectively off with the B here. Everything else is just about right. So I suspect we're going to see it change when we put new strings on. That's usually what happens. If it looks odd, it'll be intonated correctly. Or chances are it's intonated correctly. So Eddie's intonated it correctly in the past, but it really typically wouldn't be in that pattern. So it suggests there's something wrong with the B string. Putting a new set on should change that. One of the things I'm looking at here is, it's a bit confusing. Sometimes you get the rosewood of the neck kind of continues in this direction, so it makes it look like there's a divergence in actual size or space, where it kind of suggests the nut slot is wonky. So let's just have a look at this and see if there's any discrepancy. And it's a little bit difficult to measure this because we're sort of going kind of middle of fret to lined up on edge, and everything moves a little bit. So we'll kind of say Okay, the best guess we can make it is 33.8 down there. It is off. How about that? That is off. And what does it tells me? Wow. Let's just work out what's happening. God, it's confusing. Slightly off, but front of nut there to center of fret there, we're looking at, call it as close as we can get to 34. It's really hard to do this exactly. I mean, we could try this, but this isn't even terribly exact. I'll call it 34, and here to fraction out, but it's not, there's nothing major, but it's not helped by the fact that the rosewood then goes this way afterwards, so it's just the way that's been cut. But it's worth checking because it makes your eyeballs, it's like one of those parallel line drawings, because it makes your eyeballs feel funny. It is fractionally different, but nothing that would really make a difference. So I can see sort of super glue marks and stuff. There are all kinds of little telltale things about. There are lots of little scrapes down the side of this fingerboard, and I think Eddie pointed that out actually when he was here, and I have no idea why they would be gritty and why these little scrapes, unless, as I said at the time, this could be caused by bad, careless filing with a flat file. You can end up nicking the fingerboard, and I suspect that's what's happened, but in which case the feeling is that this has been refretted. That's what my feel about this is. And you can see there's some sort of marks in here where you can see some filing, or something's happened here that it's kind of cut in a. In fact, around what I'm seeing is around all of the dots there's a bit of fall away, so the dots have kind of resisted fretwork. Somebody's worked around the dots, it feels, and he's actually left them proud, which is really odd. Anyway, it's not the end of the world. We've got to work with what we've got. The frets themselves seem like they've got lots of life left in them. So I think I've got my measurements. We've got an action which actually currently is set just about right. It's a 1.2 on the high E, 1.5 on the low E. Not fantastic, but everything plays. A little tingy pingy, so we might be struggling a bit there. So we might still need to do a little bit of fret leveling, but what we've got to do is sort this nut out. That's the first thing. If we're going to set the action is set, let's call it, we're going to do any fret leveling, we've got to get this nut right first. So I'm going to slack off the strings and just kind of look at what possibilities we've got. It's got to be lifted up at this end, that's the first thing. So whether we keep the nut and shim it, or whether we replace it altogether is kind of to be decided. The thing about the original is that it has a sort of colour that fits a bit more with the original look of the guitar. But let's just shove these out of the way. But you see you can kind of feel the glue from the bit of something sticking out from. But it's just really weird. I want you to see this. Brings the wire. I've got a longer wire on this now. Really flying around. Look, Gary Moore. I was going to play that earlier on. But Gary, can you see the angle of that slot? It's kind of like that. Well, let's put it like that actually. That's bizarre. But it's also way too low. So it's got this nice, it's either bone or it's pretty polished, so it might be, you never know, plastic or bone, but it's got to come off because there's basically no other way. Magic arm, do me the right thing. Oh yeah, with my special attachment. I wish you can look back on yourself. It's like the Mars rovers. Look, that's what I attached. See, give it a good thing to hold on to away from the whiteboard, because it can't really do it around the edge of the whiteboard. So you've got this brilliant magic arm. Hold on a sec. Let me get my other thing, temporary thing. Let's just put you on here for a second. It's all Velcroed. Everything has to be Velcroed. So there we have this thing, but the magic arm, courtesy of the random radiographer. Magic arm's pretty cool, so you can just place it in any position you want. You have to undo it, and then you can fold it out of the way. So it's a little bit of a turn, and then it'll sort of swing out and do anything you want. And providing this is attached firmly, it's going to come right down low and look at wiring and stuff like that. So it's really handy. And the twist of the thing is the bit that really makes it work. So there you are, back mounted on the magic camera arm. Out of the way. Okay, so I have a feeling. No, I have no feeling. I have no feeling at all. I know we have to remove this. I'm going to use Richard. Not Richard. It wasn't Richard. Come on, get the name right. Chris's tools made long ago. And the problem with this is getting one of these out of here is tricky, because it's quite well, it will be quite well fitted in this wee slot. Now I have to hope that it's going to come out obligingly. Yes, thank God for that. I didn't want any trouble with anything splitting. So what have we got? Well, we've got a curved one, which I funnily enough got right here. So I'm going to, this is plastic, I'm going to bin that. I'm going to replace with yonder nice tall bone one. Now that's obviously too tall, so I'll do a bit of work on that. And it's a little bit wide as well, but we'll take care of those overhangs and stuff, and that's absolutely cool. So that's actually a turnip for the books, because I really didn't expect to get that old one out that easily. So I'm just going to put these strings back on here for a minute, if I can do so without them falling off. Just want to get a sense of how far off we are height-wise. So these flat wound things, you just have to treat them as normal when it comes to making nut slots. I think there's no, there's no kind of. They basically cut. They have a certain width, obviously, and you've got to accommodate for that width or cater for that width in the nut that you're making. So we're going to have to just get that right. This is coming undone, so we have to give it a bit of help. So I'm just going to want to just basically get a feel for this and how far off the mark it is. Obviously it's far too tall at the moment. It's also leaning forward, which is what it'll do when it's too tall. Okay, so in terms of where it sits, what the hell's happened there? That's fallen off there, and that's fallen off there. Right, okay, so a couple of things I want to do is it's quite wide. Now it's exact same pitch as this one here, judging by this. But what I noticed is down here, I made a recording, I measured the thing, there was about 3 millimeters to the edge on this side and about 5 on this side, and I think we want to realign that a bit. So that will involve a tweak of the neck in the pocket, but that's again fine to do, so not a massive issue. Now, a question, this is what I'm going to try and get this right for once. I'm going to just see if I can measure, get a good sense of what the height of the action is here. It's quite difficult to do. Let's see if I can make it work. Okay, let's call that 3.3. That's from the top, mind. So I can't really tell from the bottom. 3.3 with 3.3 minus, can I do it here? Minus 1.7. 3.3 minus 1.7. 3.3 minus 1.7. Just I'll work that out. It's not that hard maths, but I'm just trying to get this correct to begin with. So I'm confident where we are. Can't really see very well in this lighting. approximately, let's call it 2.05, and I'll call that, you can call that 2 for a minute. So I think, so 3.3, take off, let's call that 1.3, that's 2, 1.75, 1.75. Let's take off 1.75. Now, question is, if I take off 1.75, I can, this doesn't need, looking at the slot here, this doesn't need to be a rounded base, it's a flat base. So we're going to end up taking most of that off. So if I go 1.75 from here, from the edges, both edges, what we'll get is a very thin line which should carve off all of our curve, if you sort of see what I mean. So 1.71ish, there you go. So roughly there. Do the same there, and then we'll make a straight line-ish. Straight line across there. And what we should find is we down to a nice flat base anyway, because we're taking off this excess material. We're down to a flat base which will work, and we're yeah, we'll be down to close to the height that we want, which we can then take the remainder off with downward cutting with the nut files, which is a way I'd always prefer to go at the end of it, so that I'm confident that I'm down to the right exact first fret action that I'm aiming for. So I'm just marking this up so I can visually track it, and I'll use sandpaper for this, and this is quite good on the bottom too, because it will tell me when it's all down nice and flat. Okay, just going to stop a minute, drink my tea, back with you in a second. Okay, a little issue gone on here. This here nut slot wasn't flat, so I had to remove the nut quickly. What I found is a nice little bit of rosewood chipped off, which is quite common that it does when you're removing nuts. Oh, here's all nuts. Anyway, so I glued it back in. I'm just sort of flattening out the join, and we can sand this out and repolish it to make it nice and tidy. Anyway, but now we've cut the slot so it's nice and flat on either side. I can't see what I'm doing now. So the nut sits in just about flat now. The problem with this is we don't have a single file to level this through, and if you start doing it with sandpaper, it's really bizarre, but you tend to widen it and make it softer and rounded out at the edges. So I tend to prefer to keep trying to do it with a blade, which at least has got a consistently flat edge to it. So just trying to get right into the corner and scrape flat across the base of the slot to give us the best possible footing. And what we just want is to sit. It'll never be absolutely perfect. If it isn't dead flat, it will never be absolutely perfect. Just as I say, just trying to get this to wear down to a perfectly flat platform. And that's the best way I know of doing it. Fiddly though. Anyway, but this is one area where the guitar is not at its best already, the nut, so we want to get this bit right. See, it has a bit of a rock and roll to it. I'm looking through here, it's very difficult to see. The only other alternative is to get a bit of sandpaper on here, sticky paper on here. Always a bit reticent to do that, because like I say, it's quite difficult to keep it deadly straight. But let's have a look. What have we got? So yeah, it's important to get this bit right, because this is where it plays or it doesn't play. Okay, so nice flat surface. That's pretty much spot on. So what I can do is just pull this. I can't see what grade. I think this is 220, which will probably be perfectly good. So what we'll do is we'll just stick that on there like, oops, doesn't really matter as long as it, come on, as long as it folds over, kind of. That's what I'm aiming to do. That. And then we can sort of cut off this excess bit here with the blade, and so on at the end of there. Now, I don't use these fret rockers anymore, really, because my fret leveling method doesn't require them, so they do come in quite handy for this sort of thing. So what I want to try and do is just get this flat without ending up widening it. And I say that's quite challenging to do because it wants to widen everything as it goes. But we're hoping to get flatness, not excessive width. You see, that's the trouble now. We can always get a little bit wider. It's raised in the middle. I don't have a chisel or anything that would actually fit in there. So this is the challenging bit. How do you get this flattened down in the middle? And apart from putting a bit of effort into it like this. Difficult, oh, difficult. Very close actually. We're getting there. It would sit there. I'm just getting picky about the little tiny gap. But let's call it quits. Now I'm going to use just a little single blob of sticky. I just want it to tack into place. I don't want anything else. I'm going to line it up there and press it down. This is annoying me. Sorry, I'm going to strike that. Too much rocking and rolling going on this nut slot. Let's just clean this out a minute. Don't like it. There's too much backwards and forwards movement. Let's try and make sure we get this totally flat. So you put this in here, and we've got. So it's curved. That's the problem, and it's got a bit of a lip to it. I can't quite get rid of that, other than a bit of this. Careful. Now this is quite lucky that the blade doesn't bend, thankfully. So we should, if we're careful, should be able to remove this excessive rocking, but it's very nerve-wracking. You don't have a lot of options with the nut. If it isn't right, it isn't right. Let's get in there. Okay. Okay. Am I happy with where that sits? So weird. You can get in with the blade if you're careful. Get in with the sort of straight edge of the blade. Scrape it along there. Hopefully clear out any obstructions. And again the same this way. But we don't have a lot of room, or a lot of leeway I should say. flat note. Okay. I think we shall get it in there. I think that will be good. Right, one more small bit of glue. One more. Line up. That's it. Get in there and stay in there. Okay. As soon as you shut the door on this shed, it gets humid. Well, it does in this weather, with 91% humidity. On a rainy day and stormy day in Great Britain. Okay, so this is all now a bit undone. See if we can get it done up again with our sacrificial flat wound strings, which are a new thing to me. I've not played with these or had these on any of my guitars before, so I'm quite interested in how a new set sounds, and I might treat myself to some as a tryout. I mean, they're obviously smoother and flatter in many ways because they've had all the sort of, I don't know what you call those things, the sticky up bits removed. They are quite expensive by comparison to a regular set of strings, so it depends on whether or not it feels better or sounds significantly better. Might be quite difficult to tell, but you never know. Get on your horse. Get on your saddle. Okay. The string tree is a little bit out of position from initial installation, which is always a challenge because it's a kind of unit that has to be fitted with a little marker hole, pilot hole in front of it. So the problem you've got is it's always in danger of being slightly off the mark unless that guide hole is perfectly located. Okay, let's just have a quick feel. Okay, let's get this back into tune and then we'll get onto nut slots cutting. Sorry about this, we'll move this back a bit, my crappy broken light fitting. Okay, I'm just going to do a little bit of a pulling to get this stretched out. Not really, we just need the tuning to be roughly stable. It's not about concert pitch right at this point. No, I should. Oh, booger! I should have done. Oh, you know what I should. Oh, you know what I need. Well, no, I don't need to do this right now. I was going to say I need to adjust the two things. I need to adjust the. Give it a bit more relief down here, and I also need to realign the strings, but I can do that once I've done the fret leveling. The fret leveling doesn't have to be in exactly the same configuration as the guitar is going to play, because basically you're adjusting the guitar. Oh, give me an A, come on. Yeah, you're adjusting the tool to whatever curvature the neck has. So in this case, it will be practically flat. So, and I should have done this before I top the string. Anyway, no, come on, I'm going backwards and forwards in different orders. I need to get the nut slots right first. Let's just get that organised. Right, so we're going to go 0.3 all the way across. So what I'll do is I'll just drop off these bottom two, and I'll work outwards from my 32, and I'll also use a mixture of Chinese triangle filey thing. Obviously this is not a very good camera view. Now, I possibly should have come up with a different, put another mounting block on the other side, because we're sort of miles off the mark here when a lot of the stuff takes place up here. But anyway, so I'm going to start by cutting down in the bone with the jeweler's file, and the idea of that is just to move bulk material whilst leaving kind of a V-notch is ideal, because it means that nothing is pinching on the string. The string will sit at the bottom of the slot. As we get towards the bottom of the slot, what I want to do is switch over to my correct nut file, and this will ensure that I get the kind of correct shape rounding out the bottom that I'm aiming for. And in this case I'm aiming for 0.3 millimeters above the first fret. Now, if I add a little bit of neck relief to this guitar, which I intend to do, by definition, put a little bit of curvature into there, this will open up a tiny fraction the action of the strings over the first fret, but it's going to be so small as to not matter, or it's insignificant, the amount. So as long as I stop here at the action that I want, I know that that tiny extra will be almost nothing. But anyway, it's just so, you know, when you do this stuff, I often point out that people get very obsessed with figures and numbers and measurements as if they're somehow in and of themselves important. And I get it that, you know, enthusiasts and aficionados kind of want to feel that they're reaching the correct spec, you know, for their car, you know, if it's a car or bike. You know, everyone likes to get nerdy about the specs that they're working to. But you have to remember with this that the numbers are a means to an end only, and so as long as you remember the more important things, which is the interconnection, if you like, between the components of the action. So, for example, if I know at this point that I'm going to change the curvature a bit later on, all that's going to happen is that's going to put a little bit more action height in the middle and a tiny bit more, but commensurately very little at the ends of the fretboard. But I know that if I'm going for, you know, 0.3 of a millimeter now, and I get it, then I know that a little down the line, when I put a tiny bit more relief in, that's going to go to slightly more than 0.3, but it's so little more than 0.3 that it's not worth worrying about. It's not going to cause any action issues. So I'm using the nut file to get down to the correct shape that I want for the end of the for the bottom of the slot. Now with a flat wound, I have to say I don't really know. It's not going to exceed the gauge of the string. So it seems like it sits in the standard slot pretty well. Now what you tend to find is on the thicker strings. Now what you're hearing here, by the way, is what we had before. Wow, it's got sympathetic, that's amazing. it's actually playing the note behind the bridge. Wow. It could be because the actual, it could be the break angle is a bit, could be more extreme possibly. But anyway, let's see. Are we there yet? There's still a bit to go. Yeah. So yeah, you just got to know the interrelationship between these things. Know that if you add more relief, the height above the last and first fret will increase very slightly. You also have to realise that if you increase the bridge action, then of course the height over the first fret will also rise very slightly, because it's all part of the same triangle, really. As long as you kind of understand that, you can't go wrong. Now this one beforehand was, I would say, quite a lot too low. So that, coupled with the very flat neck, meant you would be getting a lot of what I call fret slap. And it's important to know the difference between fret buzz and fret slap. Fret slap is where there isn't enough curvature for the movement of the strings. So they're going to usually hit either in the middle or anywhere actually along there, because particularly if the action is really, really low, because it doesn't have any room to move, and it has to have some room to move. The issue is, the bottom line is, it has to have some room to move. Then I can imagine people going, yeah, but I've got a perfectly flat fretboard. On the mark. It has to be free to move, and the question is only about whether you create that space for it to move by curvature of the neck, or you create it by raising the action at the bridge end. Not in Wales, but yeah. So you know, the guitar doesn't really mind where that extra space comes from, but it will need some space to move, and if you don't give it that space to move, you will get fret slap. And I'm just doing these a little bit more, and fret slap will be that sort of thing that you can mistake for fret buzz, which it isn't. It's not caused by uneven frets, it's just caused by not enough clearance to allow the frets to spin the way they want to. Which is currently what this is suffering from a little bit. So let's get the higher strings done now. So this originally this G was way high anyway. It is now, but that's to be expected since I've changed the nut. But it was very high before, so it would have been making notes play slightly sharp down in the so-called cowboy chords, and that's one of the real big payoffs for taking care of the first fret action. Well, there's two major ones. One is that the guitar feels a whole lot easier to play, and the second one is that it cures that notes pushing sharp, which you get when the height of the first fret action is too great, and you end up having to push the strings down too far, which forces them to go sharp. And it sounds, in conjunction with strings that are open and you're not fretting, i.e. open chords at this end, it sounds terrible. And people often describe it as the guitar not being in tune, because that's how it's experienced really. You keep tuning it, you play some open chords and it sounds horrible, you retune it hoping you'll get it right, you consult the tuner, you fiddle for ages until it's perfectly in tune on the open strings, then you play a chord and it sounds horrible. And so it's often reported as, you know, people say, I just can't get my guitar in tune. And in fact what's happening is it's actually, you can tune the guitar but it's playing out of tune because of the excessive first fret action. And the tones here excessive are quite startling. All it takes to be excessive is to be anywhere above about 0.5 of a millimetre. Hence here I'm aiming for quite conservative 0.3 as my target. And I found that overall that's a pretty nice action. Now you can practically take it down to as little as 0.1, which is kind of, when you think about it, or you can test it for yourself, it's sort of what playing with a capo gives you. When you put a capo on and you get a new first fret, if you just look at the gap on your new first fret, or the one after your capo, you'll notice that the gap is in fact completely tiny, and it's about 0.1 of a mil. And yet your guitar plays nicely, feels great to play. In fact, it feels a lot easier to play than it normally does. Stays in tune, and you don't have any strange buzzings or anything, just plays. So that is a kind of a giveaway, an indicator that your first fret action only needs to be as little as that to play really well. Now, if that's surprising, what's surprising is how fast, how quickly after the 0.5-ish millimetre mark the notes go sharp when you're playing, and it's from 0.5 upwards it goes progressively sharper, and you'll see lots of guitars coming out of retailers with first fret actions of very close to a millimetre, or between half a millimetre and 1 millimetre, and that's quite amazing to think that that's how they come. And of course from the outset they're playing sharp when you play notes down here. Now at the moment I'm just taking these all down to this 0.3 sort of height, and I can tell it's 0.3 as the notes just begin to choke on the feeler gauge, and then I stop. And the idea is when you're doing this to the nut, you're going to get a really nice low first fret action that feels effortless to play. You'll cure any tendency to have notes play sharp in the open chords department. Stop right there. You'll cure any notes playing sharp, and what you'll also get is just a nice easy to play action down here. Obviously it's out of tune, won't worry about that. Also what you're getting, and here's where you listen for it, you're listening for pings as the strings go through the nut. You're listening for pings to tell you whether or not the slots are tight, and the way I've cut these now is that they're running through smoothly with no grip at all. Now, what you'll be able to see is that we've got the slots all cut to give the perfect first fret action. We've got now quite a lot of material above the whatsits, above the strings. Perhaps not so much here. Well, let's just run across it like this so you can see. Right, there's a lot of material that we're going to take a pile of that off in a minute with a Dremel, and just take it down so that we get down to, sorry, you can't see that, get down to just enough to hold the string in place and not so much more. We don't need all that excess material is what I'm saying. Okay, so that's that bit done. Now the next fun bit my wires away. Next fun bit is to, and we also trim the ends of the nut as well when we're in that next stage. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to mark up the frets for fret leveling. I think it barely needs fret leveling, but since it doesn't play very cleanly, I'm going to do it anyway. And then what we'll then be able to do is to we'll get those notes playing cleanly at that action. Now currently they're slightly hampered because there's not enough relief in the neck, and as I said before, I could have changed that first. But I'm going to do that afterwards, so a slightly different way around. Now what's important at this stage is, while I'm doing this, is for me to know the difference between fret slap, because the neck's too straight, and fret buzz. And I kind of, the fret buzz would normally be more apparent up here, so I'll be listening out for that as I level and check the notes. So if you were a little less experienced at this, you might want to do the neck relief first, so that you've cleared up the fret slap element that we were struggling with, and mainly just so you don't confuse that with fret buzz, which is just what I was hearing before, just slightly unclean notes. Okay, so there's a couple of things I've got to do once this is fret leveled. I've got to do a fair bit of tweaking, so I've got to clean up this end where the little bit of rosewood broke off. Got to just sand that and repolish that. Then I've got to take down the nut excess material, and then I've got to trim the edges so that we haven't got loads running over and you can't feel it. Get on your saddle, boy. Has got a lot of sympathetic resonance behind the bridge. I think some people would find that too much spare string going on behind there. Anyway, so the next bit we do is the fret level. Now I'm going to need to use this particular plug. The reason I'm going to use this one, not the other one, is I like to vary them anyway, but this one goes flatter than the other one. The other one has a slight curve in it permanently, which is okay if you're working beyond that curve, but on this one I want it to be completely flat because the neck we're starting off with is almost completely flat. So I slack off the truss rod, calibrate it, and it's starting off dead, I mean as good as flat. So I'll start here with this, work this now, and just be kind of, now I'm looking out for the cutting pattern, and having seen these, I think this has been leveled before, I'm kind of expecting it to be pretty good, and I wouldn't really expect to see any sort of major things showing up. It's kind of just scraping off the flat spots at the moment that were already there before, possibly taking a little bit more where it's necessary. But the idea is, and why this method works well, is to then rehook the string up and go back and try. Now that's fret buzz. Now that could be caused a little bit by the flatness of the neck, or it would be alleviated a little bit by putting some relief into it, which we're going to do. But let's just make sure that it's taken care of anyway, so that we don't have any problem with it. So I'm concentrating a little bit down that end now to clear up. These have been done before because they are pretty flat already. That's you can usually tell straight away. I mean, this is a very early days with a very light 400 grit, and there's no way I've taken off all that metal there. That's a previous leveling. I think that would be okay. Yeah, so this is, like I say, probably recommend if you were doing this, you'd make sure you did adjusted the relief first, so that you can really easily tell the difference between fret slap and fret buzz caused by uneven frets. It's important to be able to distinguish between those. I just did a little bit of bend of the neck there just to hear that little bit of buzz disappear. Yeah, this has had some pretty uneven frets. Look at that. I mean, that's about 2 millimeters across. That's not even touched. So somebody's done. Basically got a low fret here, and then these are relatively high compared to these two. These are two low frets. That's quite something. And this is a very high one. That's a high one. It's not at all even, but you know, somebody has worked on it before, obviously along with the nut. So I'm hoping to just make this play the way it should. Now moving across now, and we're still on the calibration, which is fine. There's next to no bend in this neck at all, so in a sense this truss rod at this setting should work all the way across, which I think we'll find it will. So when I've done this one, I'll stop and just test all the notes and the B and the G together, and then be ready. But you really can see how flat some of these are to begin with. I mean, they've been really hammered in the past. I'll do a couple of quick pictures actually, because it's what happens is when you're working on a guitar that's already been leveled, you see very quickly my leveling throws up very quickly. It clears the pen off the top of the flat spots that were already there, and it reveals what's already been done. And again, that's something with experience you'll know that this is not what you've done with your leveling. A little bit choked up the top there on the B. I'm just going to go back and work that a little bit more. Right up there. But that's because of these two low frets, you see. And why they're low, I have no idea. But they are clearly low, so I'm having to work a little bit harder up this end. Now this could be because they've been perhaps over pressed in compared to the others on a refret. It could be because the neck's developed a little bit of a buckle at that point, which has just happened on the West tone that I just did the other day. Well, let's do the G now. It's okay. Yeah, but who knows? But you know, when you get something that is, you know, has been worked on before, you have to sort of diagnose what you think has happened in the past. Now this is starting to get a little bit of curvature in it now, as we know. Coming over to that bass side, there is a whiff of relief in the neck, a tiny amount, and it's barely showing, but I'm just having to now dial this in to the truss rod, sorry, the banana as I like to affectionately call it, and it is incredibly tiny, the amount of adjustment that has to go on. See, that's now not curved, no, that's about on actually. So tiny adjustments required only, and then we create a space for the truss rod to work, and then in we go. I'm pretty much working with gravity at this point, just making sure that the truss rod travels cleanly up and down. It's touching all the frets, which tells me it's been leveled before anyway, apart from the ones that are low and aren't getting touched. It's these two up here. They're your I suppose your limiter, really, or the common denominator. It's the bit that's a bit of fret slap there. Not bad. Yeah, your low frets are your limiting factor. That's always been the kind of bit that you have to get your head around. If you think about it, a low fret makes the adjacent one in the direction of the bridge effectively high. whether it's actually tall of its own accord is not really the issue. If the one behind it is low, then the subsequent, thank you, the subsequent one becomes effectively high in a relative sense. It sounds almost like a Pink Floyd song about to burst out there, but so you have to kind of keep in mind. So whatever has resulted in two low frets on this neck, they are the sort of setting the tone really. And one of the difficult things to evaluate in all of this is at what point, where can you spot that they are so unusually low that you have to do something more drastic, like for example remove them and replace them with taller frets, you know, and in which case what frets are you going to replace them with, and how do you know they're going to be right? It's not bad. I'm going to do this last one now. Yeah, so it's an interesting thing that, and you know, the more experience you get in using this method, the more you can tell about what's going on from using the method. And it's really nice to learn that sort of thing. I mean, it's not scientific, I can tell you that. It's not something you can entirely rationalise all the time. You just get to spot what's going on, and I can tell you right now, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16 and 17, right, are low. There's just no doubt about it. My method tells me they are low, and they are causing, they threaten to make those notes up there difficult to play. Not bad actually now. Okay, so I'm going to call time on that fret leveling. Got where we want to go. We're just about cleaned up the last of the slightly buzzy notes caused by uneven frets, and as you can see, there's a lot of previous leveling being done and a little bit extra that I did just to clean up, which is fine. Now that, coupled with a little bit of adjustment in the neck relief in a minute, followed by realigning. Should I do that now? Do you know what? I'm going to do that now. Let's try and do this now. The more you can do that has to be done with the sacrificial strings, the better. So for example, with this, I want to do two things. I want to make an adjustment to the neck relief, and I also want to move the neck. So we need to do those two things. Oops, there goes the bridge. Do those two things at the same sort of time. So first of all, let's get the neck off. Now what did we have? We had not enough relief in the neck, which is causing good old-fashioned fret slap. Now I know a lot of people really like, you know, this is the conundrum. I know people like flat necks, right? But remember, the unalterable is your strings have to have a little room to move. Okay, and yeah, they have to get that room one way or another, and the one way or another is they either get it by there being some curvature in the neck, or by some excessive or more bridge height to give it that clearance. Now, you either want a flat neck or you want a little bit higher playing action from the bridge. You can't have both, because the strings, unless you play very lightly, in which case you can get away with it, but most people strumming chords and stuff, you have to have that room for the strings to spin. And if you don't, if you want an absolutely flat neck with an absolutely low action, you will get fret slap. And then some people mistake that for fret buzz, which it isn't. That's caused by uneven frets. Anyway, so we have a neck that we want to put, allow a little bit more curvature in, which we don't have right now. So I'm going to go counterclockwise on this neck. Wow, it's quite stiff. Now, we may or may not see a change to it now. And the annoyance about this method is I have to guess. Okay, I cannot control it while the neck is under load, which is completely dopey. You know, that's one of the, for a setup person, that is one of the biggest pains in the backside of this heel mounted adjustment method. you have to guess the adjustments you make, which is really naff. And so that if it doesn't work, I have to test whether it's worked, I have to do all the nut screws up, and then I have to come backwards and try it all again. Now, interestingly, I am seeing a buckle on the back of this plate, and I wonder why that is. I get the feeling that somebody's put something under there in the past. My little detective brain will say to me, I wonder if somebody has believed Scott Grove's joke when he said, if you remember, he said that, was it Scott Grove? Yeah, he did this kind of ridiculous horsing around thing where he claimed that he could, I think it was Scott Grove, I don't want to misquote him, but he claimed he could make the, could it be Scott Grove? No, yeah, it was Scott Grove. He made a claim that he could adjust the neck angle, shim the neck underneath the underneath the plate, so you didn't even have to take the neck right off to shim it. You could just do it straight there on the plate, which sounded completely nuts. Okay, so I'm going to now I'm going to do a little push here now, because what I want is I want the neck to, where the hell's my thing now? I want the neck to lean a little bit this way, so again a little bit blind. I'm putting a bit of pressure on. I'm going to do up two together, and I'm going to put some pressure on now. One, whilst keeping the pressure on. Two, and then the others. Yeah, so that ooh boy, what the heck? That's gone straight through the plate. That is no. Oh, wow. Look at that. That's not even the right size neck bolt. Look, it's gone right through. That's why it's bent. Oh, wow, I do not believe this. That's why it's bent. Would you believe it? Would you believe it? Oh my God. Eddie, Eddie, Eddie. That's why it's bent. It's the wrong screws. Look at that. Well, well, Diagnosis City, look at that. The reason why your plate is bent is because somebody else has gone straight through with the screw and then tried to back it out, and it's pulled this and buckled it. And that's why it's the wrong, these have been overcut. Well, well, well. Would you believe it? Has anyone ever seen that before? Well, well, well. Eddie. Eddie, 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 this is amazing. Right. Okay, that's turned up something. Now, do we have any viable replacements? Is the question. And it's not something I like to do. But having got to where we've got to, this is clearly not the right thing in the first place. So unless we use an alternative, this thing is going to basically not work. Okay, let's see what we've got. Now we need wider heads that are going to not go through that thing. Wow, that is a real surprise. You saw it right there, straight through the hole, straight in. Okay, we got wider, thicker, shorter. As it happens, that would hold off quite nicely against the plate. That's a last ditch option that I don't necessarily want to go to. I've got gold ones here which probably will go through the hole by the looks of it. So we could have a look for some close but not quite close alternatives. I've got quite a few here, so just give me a little time to fish about and drag them all out, because who knows. A fine old collection over the years. Well, that is the first time I've ever seen that and that's a complete surprise. But you see how beautifully that explained the buckle. So I got it wrong about somebody trying to put a shim under there and do the Scott Grove buckle plate fix malarkey, so I didn't get that bit right. Now the alternative, by the way, let's just have a look, because if I can't find a decent alternative that does it, we may have to choose an alternative plate that does the job better. So our 4 doofers are here, and they are close to the edge, these screws. I got a feeling that I would hold for a bit. I don't have any very small washers either that would hold into there. I don't want big sticky out washers anyway. Right, those are the originals, that's my plate. In a way, right now it would be better to use the original screws if possible. And we have something like these little countersink, what do you call them? Countersunk things, but they're not. It would be good for holding. That would hold it really nicely, but it would be a bit crap on the outside of there. Very cool. Oh, you can't even see it. I'm so sorry. I'm just faffing about here and you ain't getting a look at it. There you go, look. No, that would be nice. It would do the job, but a little bit sticky outy. Right, so what have I got? I've got a shed E-load. I'm going to have to sort these out into different sizes. Like I say, I think I would rather, for the time being, switch out the plate, even if it's not a handsome looking plate. I'd rather use a viable plate and the same screws, and then Eddie could basically find an alternative at some later date. I mean, that was a little scratched up. You see, it's got almost no bevel on it at all. It's kind of no surprise that it went right through. I mean, those were. I will go for the same screws, different plate, I think, unless I can get very clear matches. See, that's a good match, and that's got a good head on it. That would do really nicely, but I don't think I'll have 4 of those if my life depended on it. Maybe I would. I don't know. Let's see, what is it? Well, that's nice. That's not it. Is that it? That is it. That is. It's got paint on top. So this is one of those old ones with paint on top, but that's the right size, but it's not the right one. That's probably one of them. Is it? No. Hokey cokey. No. So I've got 2 of those. Brilliant. No. Well, okay. Now, I suppose an alternative would be to knock out one of these for one of those. If they are the same size, pretty much exactly the same pitch, bigger head on it, that would cover the one that's gone through. Actually, in fact, you'd be better off with 2 of those. 2 of those, but which 2? I think that's going to go through as well. Look, it's on the verge of going through. That isn't. God almighty, this is not good. It's not what you want. That was on that side, that went through there. And will that go through there? Pretty much, look. It's almost through. Yeah. Right, I think what we're going to have to do is we're going to have to switch the bridge plates. Let's get rid of these large screws. When faced with this challenge, your standard you want to keep the same screws basically, because they're the holes in the heel and through there are the most important thing. The least important component of this is this plate here. Sorry, that's the original. This plate here. I'm going to switch this over for now because this will hold. It's not brilliant though. It's got a little bit more grip than that. Are they matched up in space? Yes, they are. This has got a little bit more gripping power, darn thing. Okay, that again, that's the same thing, not quite as much, so that's not as good. I wonder if I've got any more kicking around down here. Plates, tuners, bridges, tremolos, strap bridges, humbucker bridges, single coils, humbuckers, neck plates and screws. Aha. Come on, holy moly. This is just a joke. Well, I got loads of nice plates here anyway. That gives us some more handsome options. Gold. Nice. I sure as heck never knew we had as many of these. Just put that there for a minute. You 4 things go there. 4 things. No, 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 no. Yeah, possibly. Standard plate. Nice, yeah. Bit more grippy. Yeah, a bit more holdy on. Yeah. Okay, so that's a possible. No. Possibly, yeah. More grip. Better, smaller holes, better grip, placed well. I like this. Ooh, squire. No, you don't want squire on there. That's a dirty word. Sorry. That's a good one too. Nice and clean. Same size. Identical. Smaller holes. That's what we want. I think we won't get better than this, apart from that one. But okay, question is, which of these 2 lines up the best? Okay, we're going to go with this one. Right, we'll keep that one out for giving it back. This one out. This out the way. Get down there, pain in the bum. Right, well, look at this. Never thought that would have happened. You go in there, all of you go in there, all you spares. Thank you for coming out to play, not needed. Well, will we get on with this? I've got another whole guitar I've got to do today as well. One that's sold and has to go out, so I've got to get it right. Okay, so we've changed. What am I doing? Oh, right, I'm concerned about neck relief at this point and position. Okay, so that's keeping out of the way. I'm using this one. Right. Okay. Let's try this again. Well, who would have thought it, really? Never seen anything like that in my days. Right, now I wanted the neck to go down that way, and I'm going to tighten it up under pressure like this. Lovely. Look, no screws went through in the making of this guitar. Still got that little bit of bend on it, but there's nothing we can do about that. There you go. Very nice. Okay, now let's have a look. Where does that go? Okay, and let's try it. So 2 things we really ought to do now is just put the strings on for we get them up to tension again, so that we can see what the adjustment to the truss rod did, if anything. Again, like I say, very crude and unhelpful way of having to work this out. Wish we didn't have to do it that way, but we do. Oh yeah, bridge is missing. That doesn't help, does it? Let's do it this way. 1 there, 5 there. Come on. Okay. Talk about fiddle and faff. What I like about these Fender split post tuners is that the hole in the middle of the split post goes all the way down, and the string goes beautifully into where it should do. So it's really ideal. Oh, I wish they had old Star Trek on YouTube. When I was out looking for old Star Trek, I do remember coming across Star Trek Continues, which is a fantastic fan-funded, fan-produced kind of, it's almost an amateur production of Star Trek, but it's brilliantly done. And there were only, I think they made 11 episodes, and they had to sort of crowdfund it and all that. But I tell you what, it's the nearest thing to the original. In fact, it's in a way almost better than the original, which is saying something, because you know we all love the original for its own nostalgic reasons or whatever, but or pedigree. But this Star Trek Continues. Go and find it if you like Star Trek at all. Brilliant piece of work. Come on, over you go. So again, see, fiddly, fiddly, fiddly. Thanks. Time wasted thanks to the design, really. If this was a neck-mounted adjuster, this would be done and dusted. Anyway, we learned something important. I mean, had we not had to take the neck off, I never would have known that that thing was shot through. So, you know, it's a good thing. Bad move from Fender, or if that was the original that came with the Fender guitar, that's a piece of lousy manufacturing there. You know, there's no way a neck bolt should be able to go through the plate, and there's no excuse of why it should, even after a number of years playing. That thing's got to hold the guitar together, and the fact that it's going to go through and hold nothing without you even realising it's holding nothing is pretty poor. Okay, so just looking at what I've got now, I don't know how well you'll be able to see it, but having moved the readjusted the neck a bit, we've now got a lot more real estate on this top E, which when I was playing it, I found it was falling off. So I've moved it, I readjusted it so that there's plenty of room on the E, top E now. Well, there's more room on the top E than the other way around, because you're much more likely to fall off the board on playing the top E than you are playing the bottom E. Okay, no slapping. So we've got a tiny bit more action, not an awful lot, but twice as much as was there. We could probably even adjust it a little bit more. We probably still could. Now that plays better than chords that I'm playing don't, but that actually works better. So it has that little tiny bit of relief has helped that a lot. We could do a tiny bit more, but let's leave it as it is. Right, so that's that done, repositioned. My only question now is, does the top E stay on? And actually, because you're pretty much always pulling down on the top E, if you've got to choose between the two, I would leave it exactly where it is and give this thing more real estate, so this doesn't fall off so easily. That's dictated, by the way, by the width of the neck and the width of the bridge spacing. There's nothing else you can do about that. You can't push it in without changing the bridge. You know, some people on a lot of Gibson Les Pauls, you've got about 5 to 6, sometimes more, about 6 millimeters either side of the two strings. It's like that. It's got loads of room. Here you're close to the edge, but better to be a bit more room on top E. Okay, so I'm happy with that as it stands. I'm not going to, here's another kind of call, judgment call. I'm not going to adjust any more relief into the neck, and here's the reasoning, okay? The changing of neck relief is one of the biggest feel changes in the guitar. So I've got the thing playing pretty well as it is, without having to change the feel of it too much. So smart money would say leave it as is, and only do it if it absolutely wouldn't play or there was some clear fret slapping that was ruining everything. But err on the side of changing as little as possible, you know, because it's clear that it's not even whether the guitarist expresses it. What am I going backwards for? It's clear that you know, Eddie's used to playing this guitar with that feel, and so I'm going to do my best to make the minimal change to the feel part of it, and so I'll make the judgment call that it's playing okay, adding a bit more relief for a notion of me knowing that it's got a little bit more spin room is not a good trade-off now for the potential change in feel. So I'm kind of saying to myself, right, I'll have got a great improvement now. I've leveled the remaining frets, we've sorted out the neck plate problem, we've realigned the strings down the neck to give a better alignment, we've redone the nut, which has put the strings to the correct height over the first fret. So we're on a good, you know, we're on to a winner. Let's not make any changes that risk altering how it feels to play, unless utterly warranted, really, I suppose. Now I've got some nice flat wound strings which I never had before, and I'm not going to put these old things on someone else's guitar. So much as they're kind of nice from a curio point of view, they're unlikely that I'll ever actually use them. Or you know, as they probably won't be used as sacrificial strings either, unless there's a rare occasion when someone sends a guitar in. Now this bridge here has got some gunk on it which we need to get off. So we've also got to do a bit of work at the end here with the what's it. I'll do the cleaning up afterwards, it makes sense. Let's get the Dremel, and we're going to have a little go at the what's it. You know what I mean. You know what I mean. I might as well use a big. No, let's not use a big one. Let's use a smaller one. Very small one. Going to go on the end as well. So, next bit. Taking down the unnecessary material above the slots. That's never happened before. That serves me right for not actually gluing it in very well. But I said only tacked it in, but obviously I didn't tack it in enough. Okay, I think we do need to tack it in, otherwise we will be going nowhere. I've got to be able to cut it down. I'll tell you what, while that's off, let me do a little something. I'm going to want to just sand this back. So I'm just taking care of this little broken piece of, or a little snapped off bit of rosewood here. I'm just going to smooth it out and then I'll flatten it down. Okay, so that's actually quite nice, just as is. Right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a bit more glue on here, and I'll go to either end this time, and we'll make this sit down, and I'll come back to it later. Now I know what I did before, where it's overhanging is going to fit exactly there. And what I might want to do, just while it's setting, is to use a small clamp, well, a relatively small clamp. Just to make sure it stays where I want it. Okay, well that was an interesting little thing. While I'm at it, I'm going to now just mark off the frets again, ready to level out, or sorry, reprofile the frets. Now it's interesting that when leveling on here, the speed at which those flat spots reappeared tells me another thing. Well, it tells me first of all it's been leveled quite aggressively in the past, but what it also tells me is that it hasn't been reprofiled. So the frets have been left flat, and then people have just, somebody's polished it up and played. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use this tool here to reprofile them, and how flat they are will dictate how long I have to spend working them, and I can see straight away that these have got a lot of reprofiling to do. The reprofiling just means I'm taking it from a flattened shape back to a nice arch shape without lowering the fret anymore, because we've done the leveling bit. We don't want to reduce its height and cause any further unevenness. But this is, I mean, this is far beyond anything I just did with the fret leveling. This is historic flat spots needing working out. It's quite interesting that I found something that's similar to this in the Fender Modern Player Telecaster the other day, which DR sent me for change of pickup, rewiring the control plate, reversing the control plate and setup, and the frets on that also appeared to have been quite heavily worked, and they were quite significantly flat. Now I'm not a Fender aficionado, and I don't know whether that's maybe a style that they do in the Fender factory or in a certain model that they like. You know, I know some old Gibsons used to like the sort of paper thin wide flat frets, and they used to do them deliberately that way, whereas to someone like me they just look worn out and pointless. But you know, so I don't claim to know that this isn't some sort of particular style, but I can guarantee you this would not be, this level of flatness would, unless I've missed something, is not a specified option in some custom spec. This is leveling work incomplete, and so normally I'd be done by now, but this is taking time because there's so much flat. In fact, what I should do is I should really just do a couple of these and just photograph the amount of flat on here, because this is quite substantial. And it probably might not look any better than it did a minute ago when I took pictures of it. I'm just trying to, where can I see it? There's the arcs, okay. Yeah. Oh, come on, show me that. There we go. And you can see on the 12th fret as well, I'm just showing the signs of the fret being worked quite heavily. So the wood of the fret is quite damaged, well, not damaged, but quite flattened down around, strangely enough, around the mother of pearl. So I'm not entirely sure what that's evidence of, because if you're scraping a fret for some overspill or some imperfection, you tend to go over the mother of pearl as well and clean up, or you know, make it a clean sort of smooth finish, including the mother of pearl. So I'm not quite sure why somebody studiously avoided it and carried on working around it, but well, it's nice to have something happen for the first time ever. Well, two things happened on this setup for the first time ever. The first one is the neck bolts went straight through into the wood, and the other one was I tried to Dremel a nut and it went flying sideways. Luckily it didn't do any damage, because otherwise that would have been another hour of work I'd have to do again, which thankfully I've avoided, but that wouldn't be fun. You can't predict that. Wow, a lot of work on these, my goodness. Almost there. Okay. Let us hope that this will now, I mean, if you're worried that it isn't going to behave correctly, what you can do is get a file and do it with that instead. Maybe a little bit slower, but actually in some ways a little bit more controlled. What it won't do for me is the edges, so I still need to Dremel for that. So again, you've got to be confident and control your file so it doesn't run off anywhere. So I'm cutting backwards, and more than anything you want to keep this thing away from your frets. And it seems a bit odd that I'm pressing down, but I'm pressing down to make sure that the file stays on the bone only. very attractive. Not. Okay, so once I've done the rougher side, then I'll probably do a little bit more of the subtle, finer file side. Yeah, that's good. Don't mind leaving a bit of pen in there, it's not the end of the world. I can probably clean that out. Okay, that's quite a nice flat looking thing. Let's chuck that there for now. Okay, so now here's the other bit we still do need to do with the Dremel, and hopefully it won't jump anywhere. We just want to get just in there to get that overhang and make sure it's smooth. Funnily enough, it's actually easier to do that with a Dremel than it is to do it with a file. For some reason the file is more likely to cut in than the Dremel. Especially if you can control it by hand like that. Okay, so and then down this end there's a tiny little edge on there. That we can round off so that doesn't stick in the hand. Okay. So brilliantly, I've got my ink pen still sitting in that, but I'll give it a go at cleaning it out with a toothbrush and a comb. No, toothbrush and a bit of this stuff here. Hopefully I'll get it out without too much protest. Of course it would be that this stuff, what do you call it, solvent, isn't the stuff that gets rid of this kind of marker pen terribly well. But okay, it's okay. Now we could, if we wanted to, avoiding, I've just chucked my stuff everywhere, brilliant. If we wanted to, we could also do a little bit with the cellulose thinners, which will be capable of removing, lifting up the, what do you call it, the pen off here a bit more effectively, but just you want to be avoiding the paintwork. Although I have to say with this stuff, poly finish, this stuff doesn't really technically have much effect. Okay, so what I've got now is I've got a bit of a mucky, we do need a bit of solvent on there. We've got a mucky, some mucky frets still, but we now need to polish those out so that we can afford to just let the whole thing still continue to get dusty, and then we'll clean the whole lot off in one go at the end with some solvent as well, because this has got some like glue residue on it from some time in the past. You see it's making a mess. So the nut is shaped, it's cut to size, it's got a little bit of marker pen still on it, but I'm not too worried about that for now. Now we need to polish these frets out now that they've been nicely reprofiled, and then actually I'll tell you what, I'm going to stick with this because somebody said to me the other day, I wish I could have seen the polishing bit, so for the hell of it I'll stick with it the whole length of this, so I can in future if somebody says I really want to see you working up a sweat polishing out some leveled frets, I'll go, oh well, here's the video you want, Eddie's Jaguar, Eddie's strange neck plate Jaguar. Then again, you see, this is, I think it's previously owned, I immediately forgot what Eddie said actually, but I think it's previously owned in which case who knows what somebody's done. They may have changed the plate, they may have changed the neck bolts for something else. There's all manner of possibilities, so we don't really know. All we can say is what we find, and then do what we can to improve the way it plays. So for the people who don't get easily bored, here's the part where I make up a load of thin bits of tape in order to polish out the whole of this neck. That was good. Just throw that on the floor and pick it up later, and that one hit the floor as well. Doing very well in target practice today. So I tend to use low tack masking tape wherever possible, i.e. always, unless I am unknowingly sold regular stuff, which occasionally happens through no fault of anyone's own really, because it's just, even when people are buying their stocks, it's very difficult to spot what low tack is and isn't, or which ones are or aren't low tack. See, somewhere along the line they'll get mixed up and they'll get sold on as low tack when they're not. But I use low tack because it does enough for the job, but it also is the least likely to pull off any finish, and it's usually only an issue to consider on older finishes, vintage finishes, where maybe the actual finish has been on there years and is perhaps not sticking very well. So it is worth thinking about, and just you want to go low tack the whole time, and then sometimes be very careful when you're doing vintage stuff. Might even be a case where for a particular vintage thing, if you think the finish is sort of flaking or in bad shape to begin with and you're not refinishing it, you might want to try and do your polishing and finishing off work on the frets with a fret protector strip. But I have to say, you're not going to be able to do it without some degree of pressure on the frets, the wood, the fingerboard around the frets you're working on, but otherwise it won't stay in place. And I think if you've got damaged finish on your guitar, it's going to run the risk of coming off almost no matter how you go about it, and it's par for the course. Okay, so careful. So here we are with the little thin strips, and then we just kind of spend hours doing this. And we get the whole of that covered off, and then we put a little bit across here to double that up, and then we wrap it around the back. Again, being confident that this finish is quite good, or pretty good, so we should be able to get it off the back side of the neck without anything breaking off or flaking off. And so, go down and do all of it. Somebody asked me a while back, was there a particular reason, or was there, no, they asked me was there an easy way of doing this without having to mask off the whole neck? My answer was something like, well, if there is, then it's the holy grail of guitar work, because I don't think I can figure out what it is. Unless you could do an ultrasonic polish and it didn't affect the wood in any way, I don't know. But some people use steel wool, some people use fret rubbers, and then some people use sandpaper of different grades like I do. And the only reason I think I do it this way is probably because that's how I started doing it, and I got used to doing it. And once you're happy doing it one way and you get consistent results, then you sort of stick with it until needs must you do something else. But I don't know, it's a time consuming thing, as you can see, and quite often you might get all the way through this, and then as you're doing the sanding, one or two of these little strips will come unhooked, and then you can't carry on because you're in danger of scraping the hell out of the fingerboard. Particularly, you might get away with a couple of passes if you're dealing with rosewood, but if you're dealing with maple, highly polished maple fingerboard, you have to stop instantly. The tape comes away and put some more on, which means you have to have some handy. So when I get to the end of this taping up, I'll have some left over on this rack of tape, or these rack of strips, and I'll stick those to the board in case during the sanding I get to need a couple of quick replacement strips. It just saves getting the cutting board out again and laying some more strips on there and cutting them, which is a pain. So often this is the bit that I just switch the camera off and do something else. Well, I hope this guitar doesn't have any more surprises for me. One big one on the neck is enough for today. But I'm looking forward to hearing it, feeling it play the way it should, because it was sounding lovely, just not, the action was not good. But it's always interesting to work on something and think about, or try and see what's happened to it before. You can really tell. By the way, when I say you can tell the signs of somebody having worked on it, that's not a criticism. You know, you always leave some trace of working on it. It's sort of impossible, almost impossible to do it without. You know, by definition, it's changing the material. You know, if you're changing the frets, or you're cleaning up some damage in the fingerboard, you're going to change the material from what it was, and there'll always be some telltale marks or signs. Okay, so now I'm going to take off my few spare bits and stick them to the board where I can access them in a hurry, should I need to. And actually there aren't that many left over on here, but there we go. Then I can move this board away, my faithful board. Eventually I'll have done so many cuts on this piece of board that I'll end up getting another one, but that was just a piece of MDF. Not chipboard IKEA furniture, so it was a piece of scrap basically. I'm just covering up to keep as much dust, mainly something partly to keep dust off, but actually as much as anything to protect any accidental slips with the, what do you call it, sandpaper, which is actually something I never do, but it makes me feel a little bit better doing this. So anywhere, I just kind of cover up anywhere near here where the sandpaper might brush as I'm working it. Okay, so I'm now, it's 91 degrees of humidity and I'm feeling sticky to begin with, so let's prep our bits of sandpaper from before, pre-made. So here we've got the sandpaper, and here we've got the micro mesh that I use set. And then we just go into a boring, relatively boring, long-winded thing. So these bits of paper first, and I always do the first one by hand because I like to, and it allows me to feel what's going on and kind of make sure I round off everything that's had pen on it. And I'm moving the paper as I go, so it's getting fresh paper under my fingers. Spin it round. Sort of digging down so that I'm getting sort of up the side of the frets and down the other side, hopefully. And then I'll turn this round and come at it from this way. This first bit of paper, and I just want to sense that I've covered every bit of it. And also, just at that point, softening off the edges of the frets in case they're sharp, Probably not an issue on this one because it's been well played and worked on before, but often with newer guitars that bit of fret softening on the edge is a good thing to do because the frets can be a bit on the old painful side. So then I go to the next bit of 600 grit with the block, and the block's got a bit of a curve, pointed curve in it. It's not that precise, but it allows me to dig in a little bit and it gets noisy from here on. So I tend to work up and down the whole of the neck on one spot to begin with. And then I tend to change the paper around, move to a clean bit. I usually do about 2 moves per paper. So this will give you, more than anything, an idea of the time I spend doing it. That's pretty much the only useful thing. The rest is fairly straightforward. I'm on 1000 grit now. Move along to another bit, clean, fresh paper. Fresh bit, twice on here, still 1000. Thinking while I'm looking at this, I can probably just use this just to tidy up a bit of the black pen, just widening those slots a little bit at the top. That sort of cleans it up a little bit. Yeah, maybe just about. Yeah, approved. Okay, 1500 grit. See, it's interesting. I don't know who forgotten already where this guitar came from, but one of those things that I would be pretty sure from the buckle in that back plate that somebody has unwound the screw and watched the plate buckle because it's behind the plate. And somebody knows that that's gone through the whole head of that screw and not done anything about it. Which, considering all you have to do is find a replacement plate, or even worse, change the screws. A bit of a slack thing to do, really. Yeah, I know not everyone's got a whole set of plates, but you can buy them on eBay for £1 or something. You know. Okay, so now I'm on the micro mesh sheets, and this is the 1500. And that if you're doing this and you're using a similar set, you might want to spend longer on the 1500 when you transition from the paper to the micro mesh. They say they're the same grade, but it's hard to tell. So a bit longer on this one compared to the others probably helps the transition between the two. And then probably a bit less time then to move through the set, which goes from 1500 through to 12,000 in 9 steps. And then by this sort of time I'm thinking, oh, I'm nearly finished. Now the other good thing about this method is that by the time you get here, all the precision work is done. We will need to, we'll restring it, we'll stretch the strings out. I'm not sure quite how flat wound strings behave as regards to stretch, but I'll treat them the same way as regular strings. But we'll stretch the strings out, we'll intonate it, and I'll bet you tuppence halfpenny that the B string now intonates back into the correct pattern, just because it's a new string. It'll be a new string. And then we'll stretch the strings intonate and we'll be ready to go. So even though this feels a bit onerous and boring, by the time you're here, you really are at the sort of the fun end of it. All the hard work's done, all the precision work's done, all the thinking work and decision making work. Now it's just sort of cleaning, stringing, intonating. Because the nice thing is that whatever you've levelled it to, the guitar will go back to that configuration when you restring it to the same gauge strings. You don't have to do much more. I mean, because it's a tune-o-matic bridge and we've taken it off and we'll put it back on, we will need to obviously double check the action, because quite often the adjusters down there get moved while you're doing other stuff. So you can't really assume that the action's the same. Okay, so nicely warmed up now. And lovely filthy hands. So I'm going to take off this stuff, and you can probably see the stripes where the dust hasn't got and where it has. And then flip it over and undo all the protective masking tape and pull the tags sort of apart so we can easily get it off from the front. Now this old beastie deserves to really play its best. I don't mean you, Eddie, I mean the guitar. And oh, it's Storm Adam or Alphonse or something beginning with A. Alan? I don't know. Abel. Okay, it's building up a bit of a feisty wind out there. Okay, flip it over, pull off the stuff. Hurrah, huzzah! Fun times. More masking tape hits the bin. Now, we get our, what's that stuff called? Jay's cooking fluid. No, Coleman's cooking sauce. And we're going to use that to mainly clean the fingerboard up, but also get rid of some of this bits of sticky residue that's on the pickguard here. But it's good stuff, and it gets it off just like that, and also there. It's a very nice substance for cleaning up. So I can just get it all clean. Once over down here too. Between the knobs. Matron. Okay. It's nice. Behind here, behind there, along the edge of there. A lot of dust gets caught right on the edge. Down there. And then Last but not leastified, good old squirt clean up here, and this gets any grease off the fingerboard, but it also helps me get the any residual marker pen off the frets if I woggle from side to side a bit. Nearly got everything off the nut, but it's not perfect. But it'll wear off in time. And a bit at the back. So what I also then would want to do with this is, while I'm at it, put a bit more on here. It's quite a nice inert material. Who knows how poisonous it is to human beings? I don't know, but it's a good quick hand clean, finger clean as you're moving through into the restringing stage. And you haven't got time to go in and wash up. Okay, so I just want to also put a bit of ye old oil in the neck before we get to restringing it. There are our strings. I mean, again, a nice fresh cloth or paper towel to just polish out the chrome bits. We can do that before we pack it back in its box. It's not packing, Eddie's going to pick it up, but we'll give it a sort of polish down before we go in its case. But then we'll just use this to put on some oil. Which just makes the rosewood look very nice and brings out the grain particularly. Again, this also picks up any marker pen that's kind of trapped right at the bottom of the frets next to the fingerboard, so that's quite good too at this stage. So remember, what I said is that all the way along, whenever I'm working with the nut, I'm listening out for the sound of the strings passing through the nut. And more than anything, I want no sound at all. I want it just to be clean. You want the tuning to be smooth and progressive, and I don't want to hear any pings. That's the most important thing. So, same applies now as a final stage, and I go to put on the new strings. I'm listening at every stage now for any pings, because at this stage or at any stage, pings equals problems with tuning. So if you have any pinging at all at this stage, you will not be able to get the guitar in tune, or it won't stay in tune. It's a sign of the strings being caught, and any slight bit of catch will cost you in tuning stability. So it's really crucial now at this stage that you hear when the strings are, if the strings are catching. Now, having cut the slots the way I do, I should be pretty confident at this stage that we're not going to hear any pinging sounds, so I'm pretty cool with that. But this is your kind of your last stop, but this is where you're really listening out for it now at these final stages, and any such pinging we then want to take care of it by slight widening of the slots, which probably we'd do with sandpaper and a blade just to widen, taking great care not to deepen the slots any more than they already are, because what have we got here? This is the G is wound. Okay, so maybe that's that's still not the thing. The G should be forward of the bit anyway. The G is wound, which changes the pattern, but it still shouldn't be quite that pattern there. No, this is the way around it was actually. Thankfully, I recognise it. The B is still a bit off, that's all I would say. But I'm hoping with these new strings we'll see that just tweak back into its normal or more familiar position, which would be a bit backwards of the E is what I'm getting at, which it currently isn't. So let's put our thing on there. Okay, now with the stringing, I'll tell you what, just because I can't get the magic arm over there doesn't mean I can't bring you over here for a little looky through. There you go. So when it comes to the stringing, I go up here 2 inches past the mark, and I find my clippers, which are here, and I cut, make sure I've got the right string, 2 inches past the first thingy, and then I poke it in the hool, bend it back, hold it, and away to go. And these you can go straight under. Wow, what purdy strings these are. Okay, up to the peg, 2 inches past. Maybe not. You don't technically need that much, but I kind of, if you go less, you'll find on the thin strings. You could go less on the fat strings, basically, the wound strings. But if you go on the thin, plain strings, at anything less than about 1.5 inches push through, they run the risk of sliding off. So just be warned. So occasionally I'd go 1.5 inches or 1 inch or a fret's worth, and it wouldn't be quite enough. So kind of learned the hard way, really. Okay, the wound G up to the right mark, 2 inches past, cut. Like I say, we're going to obviously need to readjust the bridge because that's since had the posts moved during polishing and dusting and whatever. There's the D, up to the second one, 2 inches past. I mean, you can wind a whole lot on, starting with the actual end, but of course down at the lower E you'll have an absolute wasp's nest of string wound onto that post, which you really don't want. And at the end, and 2. Up the end and 2. Okay, sorry, my big hands are now in the way. So I do a little bend first to make sure it catches. I don't want any risk of it not catching, and then I can use the string tree if I want. After that, yeah, a little bit off position, the string tree, but okay. So put these bits of rubbish out of the way. I'm going to go and look at the old Gary C and the Cruisers online. I haven't had a chance to look at that yet, but after this setup I will go and do that. Since I've enjoyed playing a bit of old 50s rock and roll myself this morning whilst doing this guitar, and I was talking to my dad. So I'm just going to give everything an initial stretch to make sure it's kind of on, sitting where it should sit. Treating it like a normal string, really, not being too precious because it's flat round, and also because I can't afford to break any of these strings. So yeah, and that's by the way, that is a very real consideration. So I need to obviously I need to tune this up, and I want to get as much stretching done as possible. But I don't want to break the strings because, well, it's usually it would only be the E. Which would be easier to replace. But I don't carry, oh, I missed that again. I don't carry a single string, so either which way that would cost me a set. So, but it's worse when it's a rare and exotic set. So, stretching of the strings, kind of the same principle as always, just gentle pressing, or as gentle as you wish, pressing the strings away from the fingers, and there's still a fair bit of string behind here which could store up a bit of slack too, but I don't want to press too hard over those saddles because they are quite sharp, and that's where you potentially run the risk of snapping things. So I'm just using the thumb and forefinger stretching method to take as much of the slack out of the strings as possible without unduly stressing them over their pivot points, the nut or the saddle. And I will, on this guitar, I will stop a little bit shorter than I normally would on stretching, simply because I don't have a spare set of 15-pound flat wounds that I can dive into the box and pull them out as I do with regulars. This is feeling quite nice, straight off. Stay there. Stay there. Please don't cut anymore. Don't break. I was noticing the lie of the frets on these fingerboard. It's not quite exact. And it's one of the other things now I think about, the other telltale signs of this having been refretted. That may be another one. They're not quite the exact radius. Ping down there, which means there's a little bit of a ping going over the bridge. Nice. Right, now two more little things. Oh, the glory of the Tune-o-matic intonation device. Two little things. Just adjust the height. So the saddle's moved, so that's fine. You just go down, so it's now currently at 2 and a bit. So we're just going to go dial it in a little bit more. So it's now down at 1.5 there, and we're at 2 and a fraction there, so we're going to go down a similar amount there and retune any second now. That's 1.5, we'll go down a bit more. Just over 1, well 1.25, same there, tiny bit down there, and then we'll just retune here. No pinging from the nut. How high is that? Now, okay, so that's a little bit low for those. Now what did I say? 16 and 17, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17. That's it. That's your limitation, I'm afraid. Damn it, that's a real shame. I wanted it to be a little lower than that, but you're gonna have to live with what it is. $16 and 17. That's the problem. I don't know who did what to it before it came here, but it was it's never going to work. You're stuck with that limitation, I'm afraid. Somebody's either worn those frets down by doing some bad type of fret leveling on one spot or something. It may be a case where it may be the frets somehow been hammered in harder, or some quirk of the fingerboard, which means it's goes in at that point, which isn't entirely impossible, since there are a few other marks showing the fretboard isn't entirely even all the way. Delicious. Right, one more thing to do before we move swiftly along. One more thing to do is just check the intonation. I'm going to use the electronical tuner for state purposes. No, that's not the electronical, that's my phone, which has a tuner. I'll use this one. Let's just see if we end up with anything different on the B. I think we'll get backwards a little tiny fraction on this to where it should be now. We would do if we could even so much as get a leading screwdriver into the right place. God blimey, I hate this tunematic lark. Mrs. Governor. Did I ever tell you so much as? Thanks. It's interesting, that needs to come back a bit. Okie dokie. Back with the G, back with the B. Too long. Forward with the G. Forward with the G. Forward with the G. Slightly forward with the B. Forward with the, of course it's forward with the G, that's why. It's a bleeding wound one, isn't it, Gov? We should know better, shouldn't we? Here's me expecting the usual pattern. Come on, remember where you are, Chief. Follow the truth of the G. Forwarder still. It's a wound G. Get with the program. Forward with the G. Okay. Now that's what I would expect. Everything forward again. Everything forward by the looks of it. How weird. Where'd you go? No, the other way. Oh, no, the other way. Why doesn't this thing do what it's told? Oh, I love tunematic bridges. I love them so much. I love them. I've always loved them. Wrong bleeding button. Okay, as I like it. La 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 like it. So push these now. These will be right next. Other way. Oh God, how I love tunematic bridges. See, I'm reprogramming myself. NLP. Watch this. I love the Tune-o-matic bridge. When Les Paul, or whoever he worked with, came up with this thing, what a genius. What an absolute genius. No wonder this thing has stayed unchanged for so many years. I mean, how beautifully simple is it? Ladies and gentlemen, we are complete with the Fender Jaguar. Beautiful. Alright, we're done. Jaguar done. Jaguar done. Give Eddie a message. Tell him he's ready. Eddie, come and get. Oh God, I'm sounding like Dave in Texas. No, not Dave in Texas. What's it? Dave Mad World of Fun Stuff. Okay, well, he gets a free spare plate out of it. What a deal. What a steal. And a bit of video to prove that this thing is not up to scratch. So there you go, Jaguar. Lovely. Realigned neck, set up, fret leveled, insurmountable problem frets identified 16 and 17. Set compromise around that as low as it can go. A little bit more relief, new nut, better first fret action, new strings, everything stretched and lovely, playing great. New plate on the back, taking care of the bizarre plate that didn't work, and there we go, ready to go, and this goes with it. Thanks for sticking it out with me. Hope you enjoyed that, and Eddie, hope you enjoyed playing this thing. I enjoyed playing Everly Brothers and a few others on it this morning to my dad on Skype. That was fun.